Hello all. Once again, Banggood kindly let me select some items from their stock to have a look at and give you my thoughts on. I've actually had most of these a while, and the eagle-eyed regular might have spotted them either being used or in the background in previous videos. As ever, I'm under no obligation to say I like something. It's a review vid, not a promotion. That said, I've been excited to show you a couple of the items here, and they didn't disappoint, unlike one which proved unfit for purpose without doctoring, as we'll see. Let's have a quick look at what's here before I go into more detail. This is an all aluminium marking gauge Banggood refer to as a multi-gauge, as it's a combination of T-type gauge and combi square. This is both metric and imperial. Next, another T-type marking gauge, all steel construction, micro adjustable in a variety of lengths, but in metric measurements only. Another all steel tool, a marking gauge with a steel scriber. This has metric and imperial measurement. Lastly then, an all aluminium standard and centre rule with metric measurement only. Now available with a hook stop, so thought this revised version deserved a look as I quite like the original. So let's start with the centre rule. Black anodised aluminium with white etching for measurements is a nice, easily readable contrast. Easier to read than the original red with white. The standard scale goes from 0 one end to about 305 the other. You flip it over to read the centre scale. As the name suggests, 0 here is in the centre, numbering 150mm and change toward each end. Here I just measured the 126mm width of this board and then used the centre scale, the 63mm measurement to each edge of the board to spot the centre mark. Fitting the hook stop then is via two self-locating countersunk Allen screws. I recommend fitting it to the 0 end of the standard scale, otherwise the scale won't relate to much. You'll need a 2.5mm Allen to tighten the screws. I was surprised to see this with countersunk rather than counterboard screws, as you've got no wiggle room when you seat it with countersink really. As you can see from the back, it seats perfectly flush with the back edge of the rule. If this is actually cut or machined square, no problem. So let's see. Now even though I think it's important the stop seats square to the rule, I wouldn't mistake that for this being a replacement for a proper square. You really want a longer reference edge on the stock for accurate square marking. This is meant as a general layout tool. That said, the rule does line up pretty perfectly with the drawn line when flipped, and if I do a duplication line, hopefully you can see they're pretty equidistant, at least just eyeballing it. Not bad that. One downside to this rule, and I'm not sure if it's the way they're stored or a manufacturing oversight or whatever, but it's happened with both of the rules that I've had, and that is that they don't appear to sit quite flat. It's only a fraction, but you know, there's still a slight rock to the rule when laid flat. Now it did come in a box, so I don't think the issue is there, but you know, somewhere along the line there's a quality control issue. Still, mine's subtle enough to live with. It sells for £23, and overall it's a nice tool for that price. Inside this faux leather pouch is a beautiful marking gauge. I seem to have a large collection of marking gauges, and my search for the ideal one continues. So this is an all steel tool, and feels and looks nicely made. It has a steel roller for tracking the workpiece edge and a steel pin for scoring or score marking. The pin is fixed in place on the rear via a tab and slotted screw. A mini pocket on the pouch carries a spare pin. The end of the pin has a 45-degree bevel, and its longest edge should back against the roller guide for accurate marking. I guess there's scope here for re-edging these pins on a grinding wheel. With the pin backed right to the roller, it's good to see the scale rests precisely at 0 too. As mentioned at the start, this has both metric and imperial scales, bottom and top respectively, each with a vernier scale. For metric, the vernier is good for the nearest 1/10 of a mil, and for imperial, the nearest 128th inch. Obviously with the pin just held via its plate and screw, you can adjust the position of it. I'm lifting mine up a little here, so I have just over half the guide roller able to contact the workpiece. The pin sits in a slot machined into the steel, so alignment is easy. Just take care that the bevel is facing the right way. That feels much better. I've set the gauge to 30mm and get to marking a square corner of this ply. Nice even scored lines there. As expected, both lines look bang on 30mm. One of those tools where it is what it is really, not a lot to demo. A couple of things I'll mention is it has a small screw on the backside at the end of the 200mm or 8-inch rule. It's just there as a stop which you can leave in or not, as is your preference. On the stock, either side of the thumb screw for tightening down, there are two tiny screws for adjusting the friction or resistance of the rule movement in the stock. These sell for £14.60 currently on Banggood, with 75p shipping unusually to the UK. It's a super quality little tool for the money that. No reason it wouldn't be a tool for life if cared for. I've no issue recommending this one at all. On to the T-type marking gauges then. These are new to me, but I've been keen to try them, having seen some of the Japanese and South Korean joiners I follow use them. I got Banggood to send me one of their budget ones, along with their top flight one, so as to compare. So I'll start with the budget one, which, although the budget one, still sells for around £27.91 currently. This is sold as a multi-gauge. This has an all aluminium construction, unlike the all steel of the more expensive one. Moving the rule out, you can see why they're called T-type. The rule on this has metric scale one side and imperial the other, 280mm and change long, or 11 inches. On the stock you have a metric vernier scale and imperial top, with laughably high resolution on mine being supposedly good for nearest 200th of a mil. You'll see why it's hopelessly optimistic soon. What makes this a multi-gauge as opposed to just a T-type gauge is you can flip the rule round and use it as a sort of combi square. For this reason, you'll notice there's an offset 0 for use with the T, while on the other edge the scale zeroes at the end of the rule for combi square mode. Same with the inch scales the other side. On the stock, once again we see a little screw, plastic this time, for adjusting the friction of the rule alongside the thumb screw for tightening down. Good. The aluminium stock is two pieces, the main stock and the reference edge. These are joined by two screws, countersunk again rather than counterbored, so scope for adjustment is slim if it needed it. Which brings me on to a massive gripe I have with this tool. Here you can hopefully see I've precisely aligned the zero markers. It rests there naturally when fully back, great so far. Except that if I turn the body a little, you should be able to see that the reference edge on the stock sticks out beyond the T rule by about a millimetre. So clearly that's not zero, is it? And what use is a vernier scale if stock and rule don't zero? Madness. Now you could save this tool if you had a disc sander, sanding the reference edge of the stock back until it meets the T rule. I don't have a disc sander, so I'm going to mount it to a square corner on a piece of ply and lop off the excess with the miter saw, using the back side of the stock to set it square against the ply. The remaining stock height is about 9.5mm, so I use 10mm packers with a 1mm one in between to take up the excess, then have at it with the miter saw. Well, it worked. My marks at 0, the T rule and stock edge are now perfectly flush, so I guess it can be saved. So let's try it out. I've set it to 80mm and will attempt a square in the corner of the ply. I'm quite surprised to see the lines look pretty close to square, near as damn it bang on. And they are accurate 80mm lines. Combi square mode set to 80mm meets the lines nicely too. So all told, an awesome layout tool design, but there's no way I can recommend this. I mean, I had to chop into it with a miter saw to make it good. If you're happy to do that, by all means take a punt on one. But before you do, watch the review of the next tool. As soon as you open the box of this one, you know you're in a different league to the last tool. It looks and feels serious and thankfully comes in a nice wooden case with foam inserts to keep it just so. This isn't any kind of multi-tool like the last item, just a straight up, no fuss T marking gauge. These are available in metric only, in 160, 250, 300, 400 and 500mm lengths. It's the 500mm I have here. The T head of the rule on this one has a centre scale, on this size going 80mm in either direction from centre. This is a detail I like for layout. Also, with the marker at 0, the rule edge and stock edge are perfectly flush, which, again after the last tool, is a beautiful thing to behold. Once again we get a vernier scale, good for 500th of a mil increments, overkill for woodworking, but accurate temps are handy. To help with this, there's a micro adjust feature, so you can say loosen the thumb screws to get near your fraction, then lock down the micro adjust and use it to creep the main stock to the vernier mark. Or you could use it to accurately transfer an existing mark or material size, remembering to lock the main stock down when you've reached your mark of course. Back to my trusty piece of ply, I've set the gauge to 140mm. I'll mark a square in the corner again and, just for the sake of it, use the centre scale on the T to mark the 70mm centres. My spotlight was glaring on me here, so if the centre marks look slightly off, that'll be me, not the rule. I set the gauge to 70mm to see if I got close, and in doing this, hopefully you can see uses for this type of marking gauge for layout. For my Mondrian and Marlowe Moss inspired tabletops some of you may have seen, this big 500mm T-type gauge will be a godsend. I hope you can see, difficult with the shadow and light, but the marks are bang on square. They're also precisely 140 and 70mm respectively. So let's not mess about then. I can highly recommend this steel T-type square with micro adjust. In fact, I'm forking out my own cash for the 160 and 300mm versions. Talking of cash, this 500mm Whopper will set you back £74.50 currently, with prices varying down to £39.44 for the 160mm version. This might seem costly to some, but for the quality of the tool, I think that's incredible value for money. It's a premium tool and one I recommend. Also, just as happy to recommend the steel marking gauge with the scriber. Be very surprised if any of you would be disappointed with these. The aluminium rule with the hook stop and centre scale, for the fact it's in use so much, I'd say it's a tool I'd recommend. I use it a lot and find it useful, but the recommendation with the caveat that it may not arrive quite flat and so could be a bit of a lottery. The multi-gauge? Look, I've made a working tool out of it and you'll no doubt see it used in vids, but no, I wouldn't bother. Seriously, if you want a T-type gauge, save the extra tenner and get the 160 or 250mm steel version. That's a proper tool for life. This one's a gimmick. Regardless, links to all these will be below so you can have a gander for yourself and make up your own mind. There'll be affiliate links, so if you do buy anything, I might qualify for a small commission, and cheers if you do. As always, I hope this Banggood vid will help you better navigate the woodworking tools on offer there, and if you've made it this far, thanks for watching.